So I have just transferred my worms from this initial bin that didn't have any drainage holes to the new bin. It does have drainage holes. So this cardboard you see on top is actually what was on the bottom of the bin to begin with. And you can see there's one right there. They're pretty happy about the whole thing. It's got a nice consistency. There they are, perusing their newly upside down turned world. Sure, they're reorientated. And you can see I got screen here so that they don't fall through into the collection bin. Got this nylon screen here. And another thing I've decided to do is I'm going to drill holes. Sorry, got this on a tripod. I'm going to drill holes all up in the sides here. And I'm going to actually use RTV silicone sealant Permatex because it's basically food safe. It is food safe, actually. You can use it in the kitchen and places like that. So how about that engine gasket? Even like RTV red, especially the high temperature, you can use that too. Because it's food safe. It has a high modulus, as they say. And so now that I've turned it upside down, I'm going to treat it just like a new cycle I'm going to do, which is you add like 2 or 3 inches of bedding, moistened, and then you feed them in one spot. And then after they've eaten, I feed them enough to that they can eat it in like 48 hours. And you just put it right in the surface here so that they can come up to it. But I'm going to add the new bedding, and then I'm going to put that in one spot. And then when they eat that, I'll go over to another spot, and then another, and another, and then one in the center. In the center. And then once they filled all that up, I'll add another layer. That'll be pretty close to the top by then. And then it'll be time to put another bin on top. And with the lid on and it filled up sufficiently, they'll be able to crawl up through to the next bin where I'll set it and start again. So let's do that. And I'm going to feed them this here old banana. This is going to be their meal. And what I feed them is shredded cardboard, newspaper, and I like to mix it with just a little cocoa coir. Or you can use some of your own bedding that's in here already and mix it in. Because what you want to do is inoculate it with the microorganisms that are decomposing your food, because that's what your worms are feeding on. And you also want to make the environment as friendly as you can for the bacteria and yeast and whatever else is decomposing the food, because that's what the worms are eating, and it's pretty much the same conditions. And that's why I'm going to drill holes in the side and put nylon netting on the side of the bins too to keep them from crawling out, so that it has better airflow and the bacteria can proliferate more quickly and eat the food more quickly and provide food to the worms at a higher rate. And that ultimately provides me worm castings more quickly, which provides more food for my tomatoes and garden this coming spring and summer, which is more food for me. So the better you take care of your decomposing aerobic bacteria that break down the food, you're taking care of yourself in the end. And I feed them, like I said, shredded cardboard Amazon boxes, and I use Amazon Basics 18 sheet crosscut shredder. And then you shred enough, and on a small scale you'll then have more than enough bedding. And so what I use is this, and then the newspapers. And you can use colored flyers that come in the mail every other day, because that ink on the colored flyers is soy based. It's safe. The only thing you don't want to feed them is anything glossy or bleached, because that has chemicals in it. It's not organic. It's not good for the worms. But these browns here, the browns is your carbon, the greens is the nitrogen. I forget exactly the ratio because I'm still getting used to it. maybe 20 or 30 to 1. But anyways, you got your carbon, your bedding. It's also a food source for them. Sorry. Let's see. And then the greens are the food you feed them. You know, like, you know, lettuce, any scraps that isn't a citrus or an onion or a garlic, any other kind of vegetable, especially like squash, pumpkin, watermelon rinds, any of the honeydew melon rinds, squash, even tomatoes in moderation. They love tomatoes even though they're somewhat acidic. And that's another thing, you want to keep the pH balance. You can get into that later. And so I'll just get to that. And I'm going to mix it with a little cocoa coir I've had sitting around. Let me get that. So I'm going to mix it with some of this garden coir. And you can even throw perlite in there too, you know, puffed volcanic lava or glass or whatever, because it has a lot of holes in it that holds moisture. And it keeps, it keeps the bedding from getting compressed. It keeps it fluffy. And especially if you're going to be using the worm castings for your garden or whatever, then you're already pre-mixing. And if you don't like it, you can either one, not add that perlite, or you can screen it out and reuse it, being perlite and inert. So I'm going to mix that with some of that. And I might as well use the container I've already had here. Bring out this yummy old banana. It's actually the kind of banana I'd use to make banana bread, but it's got some mold growing on it, so I'm not going to use it. Because whenever you see mold, that's like the fruiting body already, which means the actual mold is inside it. Same thing with like mushrooms, the kind we eat, button mushrooms or whatever, which grow up into larger mushrooms like portobello. That's another thing I never knew. Your mushrooms, your white mushrooms you buy at the store, button ones, are actually baby portobellos, or portobellos are full-grown button, whatever way you want to look at it. Anyways, so let me get the spatula out. Made sure to get all the worms, and I want to scrape in all this stuff too, just in case there's some cocoons left in this. So what I'm gonna do, throw in this. That'll give me a good idea of how much of this I want to use, because I want to give them a couple inches like that. And then I'll throw in some of the garden coir. And it doesn't have to be a bunch, just to balance it for it. Man, it smells great. I'll throw that in. And that's going to compress down a little, so I'll get a little bit more, bedding here. The worms, by the way, the red wigglers or wrigglers, however you want to pronounce it, live in the top few inches. They don't go deep like your night crawlers. They live just under the leaves and consume the microorganisms breaking down the leaves and the twigs in the forest floor under the trees. I want to get a little bit more of that shredded cardboard. Smells good. A little bit more cardboard here. And they really like this cardboard for a couple reasons. Because it stays reasonably fluffy on its own, because it has that fluting between the two layers, or whatever you want to call it, right there. And they like crawling in there and laying eggs and eating it and chilling out. It's our little worm man cave, so to speak. Because the worms, they actually breathe through a mucus coat, their mucus coat, and that's why you need to keep them moist. And that's why you see dead worms on sidewalks, because their mucus dries and they can't breathe. And that's why they come up when it rains, so they don't drown. They're actually sensitive to barometric pressure. So get that, and we mix this up. And the idea the idea is to simulate their environment. So this extra layer I'm adding is going to be like the wet leaves. And then, like when I put this on the top layer, is this in frame? When I put it on the top layer in this other, where they're at, what I'll do is you just make like a little furrow, like here. You just dig like a little furrow, and then put the food in there, and then loosely cover it back up. That way, it keeps the food moist, and it's real close to where they're at, and they can come up under it and in and around it and eat it more quickly. So we got that. And the only other thing to do is actually wet this down. And I'll even show you, if you want to get really technical about it, something. You can weigh the dry ingredients. And if I wanted it like, say, 75% moisture, that would mean that 75% of the bedding would be water and 25% would be dry material. And so to arrive at that, you could just multiply the dry material by 4, and that's how much it should weigh then. Or multiply the dry material times 3 and add that much water, because then it'll be a ratio of 3 to 1 water, or 1 to 3 bedding to water. And it'll be 75% moisture. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to weigh this. And another way you can do it is you can, after you've wet it and soaked it, you can squeeze it. And when you squeeze it, if just a couple drops come out, no more, then it's at a good moisture level too. But I'm being geeky, so I'm gonna weigh this and multiply that dry weight by 3 and add that much water and let it soak for like a half an hour to make sure that core also properly hydrates. And so I'll come back after that. So got my handy dandy Ozeri scale. I'm going to use one of my mixing bowls here. I'll set it on there. You can set it on and then turn it on, or you can turn it on, then set that down and tear it out to 0, so you're only weighing the ingredients and not the bowl along with it. So I'm going to turn it on, tear it out, and I'm going to add this and see how much all this weighs. So we have basically 11 ounces. So I need 33 ounces of water. So let me go get 33 ounces of water. Okay. So you can see that's my bowl weighs 8.15 ounces. And that is pretty much close enough. What's that, 34 ounces of water. I'm gonna actually warm that water up some to facilitate the absorption by the media. Okay, so the bowl weighed 8, the bedding weighed 11, and then 3 times that 11 for 75%. So we'll have 8 plus 11 plus 33, right? Yeah. So 52, 44.8. So this should weigh out to 52 since it's not tared. Maybe, I don't know, it's going to fill it up pretty full if I do it that way. We'll see how much we can get in there though. And if it's too much, no, it won't fit. That's good to know. I'll keep that in mind next time. So 52, and I was like 1 over, so 53. And 53 it is. So I'm gonna let that soak. Scrape this out in case there's any cocoons in it, and add that to it. And I'm gonna mix in a little bit of the top bedding too, to inoculate it with microorganisms faster, to break it down, because that's what they like. So what I'll do is I'm gonna leave them under this bright light to usher them down so that I can then scoop up that top layer and mix it in with that. So I'll leave this lid off, and then I'll be back in like a half an hour once it's all ready and moist.